right? And if we are not active in either engaging our career, managing our career, being active in decisions or strategy and having a voice, it's going to be determined for you,
Yeah.
right? By someone else, right?
Yeah.
Especially with AI, you're not going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose your job to someone who uses it better than you, right? So I just think it's smell the roses, enjoy this ride. It's going to be scary. It's going to be stressful. But I think, careers will be built off this period.
All right. Hello. We are so excited to have today with us Anthony Martinez, who is a partner at Mercer, a global consulting firm. We are so excited to get your thoughts today, Tony. Welcome.
Sandra, thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to the conversation today.
Awesome. Let's just jump in how we like to do it. Tony, you've been leading people for 25 plus years, and now you manage a global team of 44, so a big size team globally. What is the biggest shift you've seen over the years on how we sustain high performance without burning out?
It's, I think, on top of the mind of every leader right now. With the proliferance of technology across every industry, I think everyone goes into the weekend and comes out with 50-word buzzwords of AI and agentic agents and everything. We're really on the precipice of our economy transforming into this new digital age. As a leader, right, there's no playbook for this. And there's a lot of demographics all in the workplace right now trying to figure this out. Boomers to Gen Z, right, all working together. So what does this mean for leaders? It means the way you communicate, the way you need to lead in front of the pack, I think, is really, really important for the next sort of 5 years.
Okay. Yeah, you're totally right. Like there's huge transformation happening for sure. How big it's a debate still, but big. But also in life, we've seen versions of this before as well. Like change is not new, just the acceleration of change and the pace of change likely is higher than it ever has been and accelerating faster and faster. That's probably the biggest difference. So you are saying as a leader, you need to get ahead of that change. How do we practically, what does that look like for you leading up your team now, again, globally a little bit?
Yeah, no, it's a good thing. And I tend to think about this both locally and globally. From a global perspective, I collaborate with 3 other global leaders to make sure that our business is running the way it wants to run and that we are transforming the way we want to transform. But when we deal with different regions of the country, again, different demographics, communication, consistent and clear communication is a challenge, right? Because people learn different ways, people communicate different ways, and people have different styles. What I really think it's important is to get to the core issues, right? What are the core things we want to accomplish? We want to transform this piece of business. We want to restructure this type of area.
Right.
But to your point earlier, it's the speed. When I started my career in the early 2000s, when you did strategic projects, you had time. You broke out into groups, you sat down, you might have done an offsite. Here with our global leaders, we're communicating on a daily basis across technology, Teams, Zoom. And so, the quicker decisions and ways you got to communicate, for example, I have a leader in Australia, a leader in London, and I'm here in Boston, Massachusetts. Just getting on a Zoom call, right, takes a little coordination because what's daytime for me is nighttime for my colleagues. So globally, it's taking that top-down view of what's the appropriate way to communicate. Locally, I may communicate a different way with my team, just knowing them and being a little bit closer to them. So flexing your style, it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all. That's been my biggest learning since transitioning into a global role, call it over the past 5 years.
Awesome. And I kind of see 2 points that you kind of brought up at the core. It's keeping focused as much as there's more coming at us. It's keeping focused on the core issue. What are we actually looking to accomplish? And use that to cut through the noise or the demands to keep us focused. And then secondly, as always, as communication is still important as it always has been, it can just look so different nowadays, be it if you're communicating locally in person or globally, and we have to get real with what it takes to set up those communication channels. And how we actually get things done, adjust to personal preferences. Is that kind of is that a good summary?
It's a great summary of it. And, one of those points that we've done, right, to help with that challenge. And you agree, the pace of speed of things, right? The amount of emails, the pings and communication,
Yes.
finding the right way to communicate. We've landed on a Teams channel. as opposed to getting emails and coming into your day and starting with, let me get through the 50 emails, just to
Yes.
figure out what's going on today. There's a lot of stuff we do that you don't need to look at right now and don't necessarily need the a flashing email or ping in your face. So creating these channels, doing work, updating the team in those channels allows people to go in when they need to go in, and it doesn't really disrupt their day. Bandwidth is a word I use a lot, probably too much. And protecting bandwidth is something that I'm really focused on locally because I think the one other formula in the equation here is we're transforming, we're communicating globally, but at the same time, we're delivering for our clients. It's really this fine-tuned balancing act of doing all three things at once. And as a leader, that could get draining. And as a person receiving the leadership or communication or messaging, getting that synthesized into exactly what the expectation is, why we're doing this. So it becomes transparency. Leadership to me now, transparency is important because there's that no playbook, right? And we're kind of on an equal footing with our staff and people. And if we're older, we might be working with people that are a little bit more technologically enabled than we are. I think this whole top-down leadership, it's really flexing leadership and taking the person best to do the job, best to communicate point of view is really an opportunity to people. Now, what I tell to young folks or people in a career, because we're seeing the removal of the entry-level job, if you will, in a weird way with automation and technology.
Mhm.
How do you come into the workforce already a year or two sort of primed? You got to engage and you have to ask questions. And we can't be the new person anymore, just sitting there waiting to be led. Have a point of view is super important. That's a super important trait within a Mercer candidate when we look to hire. We
Mhm.
want all of that and that have a vision, that are engaged, because we need that energy to, again, transform, deliver, and think about the future in a way of protecting bandwidth.
Love that. I don't think you can say it enough, in my opinion, protecting bandwidth. Like, we talk about versions of that a lot. So it depends on what version lands on you, but that has become, I think, a core skill set nowadays, right? Because again, there's so much we could do, so much information to engage in. We can all be very busy, but are we getting those right things done? We have to protect that bandwidth. And I've heard different terms used for it, and I wonder if you agree. It's really about managing our attention, energy, our goals, because that part is still the same. We're still human beings running on a daily cadence, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's really how good we get at managing our own bandwidth, aligning our energy to the core issues and challenges and goals we're trying to deliver on. That has to become a key capability, if you will,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
success. Is that
It really talks about work-life balance, right? And I
yes?
heard a really interesting quote from Jeff Bezos talking about work-life balance and that there really isn't that. And I had a few leaders in my career tell me that there isn't
Yes.
work-life balance and it's more of a loop. And I think it's making sure there's time to recharge and have that energy to come back energized into work to engage. Again, protecting the bandwidth or protecting time and making sure people have those weekends to check out and not have to be on your iPhone doing work is really important to spend time with friends, family, and be in touch with your loved ones. Why? Because you show up on Monday energized and engaged. So if we could get that sort of loop right of coming in, doing a great job, being engaged, having a view, putting work down when appropriate. And putting work down is different for everybody. It depends on the size of the firm you work at.
Yes.
A startup is a lot different than, say, a global consulting firm like Mercer. We may have pockets of startup teams and groups of initiatives, but you really got to take a look. What are we doing, right? At a firm like Mercer, where we consult across so many different industries, there's so much stuff internally to learn. So you can't bite off too much you can chew. I was on a recent panel with a couple CIOs that lead nimble teams, 5 people, 6 people, and they've both been very successful. I think the one common trait I've heard from them, and I'm trying to emulate, is don't bite off too much you could chew. Do what's realistic and do it really well, and then take another bite of the apple. That's something I think we're going to be looking to do as a group and team into 2026.
Yeah, that's really good advice there because you're protecting that bandwidth, taking, and I love how the conversation ran into the work life balance. I mean, I see it that way as well because it's like we're a whole person. If you're thinking about just your energy and bandwidth at work, you're leaving a huge chunk of yourself on the table. Recharging, right, is a part of the equation. You can't show up day in and day out without having taken care of things at home, be it your relationship relationships, your personal health, balance, recharging, etc., to be your best at work. I think that that seamlessly comes in, and I love how you brought that in. And then can't chew off too much. That's a great practical way to say we have to really know our own individual pace, right? At which we can get things done, delivering on the clients today, the demands of our life in today, while also positioning and preparing ourselves for the future and all the things that are
Yeah.
coming.
And
Yeah.
that's transition for me throughout my career, right? If you think of a
Yes.
career life cycle, I was eating ramen noodles, not making a lot of money, starting my investment career, right? And life was about going out with friends on weekends, spend all your money going
Yes.
out and, working hard. So that meant staying late. 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock
Yes.
working if I wanted to, get the promotion or get the next opportunity. Fast forward to where I am now, a little more gray hair than I had when I, 20 or so. I have two young kids that are very active and friends and sports, and I want to be there for them. Right. And so, as a 46-year-old professional compared to 20-year-old me, I might not be working till 9 o'clock at night on a
Yes.
Wednesday. I may be getting off at 6 o'clock and going to a soccer game, in my town to go watch my daughter play or traveling to go watch my other daughter go play sports. So, it's planning essentially for me at my level and role, being really tight with your time. And not only, the work, it's the life, right? So I have an integrated calendar. And that's what I've done to sort of keep myself afloat to make sure to use bandwidth again, that I'm not overloading myself.
Yeah.
And sometimes it might be dividing and conquering at work or at home. And that's where I think, again, communication is key. And where I found communication really being important is, letting your colleagues know where you're going to be, lead by example,
Yes.
show up. Same thing with your kids. Hey, I'm
Yeah.
going to be at this soccer game, maybe a little bit late, going to be at this basketball game, but I'll leave at halftime. I've been finding different ways to sort of
Perfect.
keep my mental sharp, both at home and both at work.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think again, it's really built so beautifully on. And sorry, I can also say super relate. I feel I'm like a mom of soccer boys, so also for I can totally relate. Success looks very different today than it did 20 in our 20s, 30s, right? It's like you could speak for me, which I'm sure when you're saying that, like sure many of us feel that as well. Just it takes time to give that some thought energy, like to expand that success to work and life. What's the reality of, you know, this phase of life, right? And then adjust that goal and allocate the right bandwidth to all of the aspects of our life that matter to us right now, right? Because I'm sure you wouldn't see yourself and it's great to see a leader like yourself talk about this because I think sometimes we get lost in the noise, right? Just thinking we need to do better at work, get to that next level, but there is really no success at that next level if the house is on fire, right? Behind it. Like we have to look at what makes us actually successful human beings. And then, work, of course, is a huge part of that, but integrated also with the rest of our life.
Something I heard recently that really, really struck me is you can
Mhm.
have it all, but you cannot have it all at once.
That's the
Right. And
same
I
thing.
and
Mhm.
I think I try to frame my life around that. Right. And there may be weeks where
Yeah.
I'm on the road, I'm in Europe traveling, right, where I'm not going to see my family for a week or so. But there may be a week after that where, you know what, I'm going to work from home a little bit more this week just to be a little bit more visible. Again, it goes to that planning. I think integrating that work life into that holistic sort of planning and being a visible leader and telling these stories to staff, I think are
Yes.
important. I think when I started my career, one of the things I found really successful for me was find my North Star, find my role model, like who in the office do I want to be like when I grow up one day? And I've kind of always done that, whether I took a new job, left and joined a new company, who looked like they were successful and what traits were they emulating, right? And that role model changed for me throughout time as I got
Yeah.
older, right? And leveled up a little bit in my career. So I think it's really important to share these personal stories,
Yes.
different ways, being in a parking lot on, an iPhone on Teams and Zoom. Technology has helped us, right? So
Yes.
I think it's leaning into the future, leaning into technology, being open and honest with your management, right? If someone
Uh-huh.
ever came to me on my team, hey, Tony, I need a break, and
Right.
might have used all my vacation days, might have do something, there's little things managers could do, I think, to help prop up people, lift them up, because we all have life that happens, right? We all have kids, older parents, loved ones that could get ill. And these are things that happen on a dime. And, thinking about the business and structuring it in a way, right? Having backups, having some redundancies in case, hey, you know what? These four really critical folks need to take 2 weeks off. Thinking about your business as a franchise and how to keep that durable throughout different economic climates or different issues with your team, right? I have my operations director is on federal jury duty. She's gone for a week, right? That's an important obligation, but we got a great backup on her team, a number two who's ready to step up, and that becomes opportunity for her. So when life happens, it creates opportunity. And what I would kind of communicate to younger professionals coming in is raise your hand, be eager. And when you see that, where could you jump in? Because again, there's no playbook, and leaders
No.
are very distracted and are feeling the realities and pressures, right? Running your business efficiently, where is growth going to come from? How are you going to
Mhm.
integrate these new tools? To be fair, managers are having a tough time doing it all, right? And so
Yeah,
being a
absolutely.
vocal and engaging your manager on your needs is, I think, going to be really, it's a two-way street of communication is what I'm trying to say, more now than ever. As we're coming back into the office more too. That's another sort of factor, I think, that's, not wearing people out, but just another
Your thing to
thing
deal
on the
with.
plate, right?
Yeah.
So Boston is having issues with their trains, as we always do. So, that's becoming a new planning session. All right, I can't just get on the train. I might have
Right.
to take a half hour earlier train in case I'm delayed 15 minutes. So,
Mhm.
it's kind of getting back into that regular flow of business and work and commuting. But I think where we've landed is a good spot. Mercer in particular, we're 3 days in the office. And that's allowed that bandwidth to sort of maintain, at least for me personally. So it's been really great for the company to allow us to do that.
Yeah, it's so important. That's great to hear. Yeah, I love this, Anthony. I mean, I couldn't agree more with what you shared, and also this absolutely. I would underline just it is so important to share these stories and these perspectives. It's one of the reasons we're having this podcast. We realize we're having some of these really important conversations. I wanted to share them with people just because the data shows that we are getting lost in the noise of it all, right? Like we're getting overwhelmed, stressed out, and it's really important to understand that we can help it. It might seem out of control, but if we kind of build up some of this clarity internally to what is success, what are my priorities, what are my boundaries, and then have those come to the managers with those conversations, ready for those conversations, not just adding to their pile of problems, asking them to solve it for you, right? But really having some clarity about what am I doing, what am I not doing, what do I need, and then communicating that is really how we make progress.
I was lucky to have a few good bosses and leaders, and that's another thing I would suggest, right? I think you work for people just as much as you
Right.
work for companies, right?
Of
And
course. Yeah.
sometimes it's just not a good fit, personality style, or quite frankly, sometimes you don't have a good manager, right? And that there's a lot of not good
Yeah.
management in the professional workforce. Case in point, I was made a manager, I think, at 23 years old, right? When I started my career. Knew little to nothing about management. If you were to rate my management skills back then, I don't think I would have scored well. But you got to start somewhere, right? And you got to learn. And it may take you losing that really talented person to sort of wake you up as a leader, right? Oh, wait, I couldn't retain this person. And I actually didn't get the feedback until they were walking out on the exit interview. And so throughout the years, that really told me you need to dip in and engage with your people. And that even
Mhm.
means if you're a step level up, right? So I got
Mhm.
to the point now I got really strong people managers, but that doesn't stop me from grabbing coffee with one of my junior folks, right? And I think getting that perspective across all levels is really important, particularly for a global leader. Again, as you're balancing different cultures, time zones, different ways to do it, the issues could really extrapolate and get complex, right? There's different regulation and different products, right, that are more popular in different areas. So if you're leading a global business, right, how do you do that consistently? And you may end up in a spot, right, where you're doing some core things globally consistent and you're doing some locally things, tilted to way the local markets. And that's where I think global business is really shaping, that global mindset, but local focus and execution is going to be really important.
Yeah, that's the holy grail of the balance, right? For sure. I want to ask you, like, I love that you're sharing some of these things, and I imagine you're probably like that with your team as well, very open and again, sharing the perspective is very valuable. But I wanted to ask you, just touch on a little bit about the idea that you have global teams and you have 44 of them. Uh, touching base even with single person becomes a real calendar challenge, adding to
Yeah.
the existing calendar challenges, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just was wondering if you have any thoughts on, practical thoughts to that you haven't shared yet on just like how do you do that considering the global challenges and differences, right?
Yeah, yeah. So great point. Two examples I'd show. One from a leadership group, where I'm representing our North America and Latin America group. Need to work with my European counterpart and my Australian counterpart. We do, and then we have a global rating meeting, right, where the whole team is going on and voting on reports. So we kind of do a share the pain model
Mm-hmm.
where we
Oh, yeah,
rotate time
you're the
zones.
face.
Right.
Yeah.
So, there may be half the year the US is waking up super early to go to these engagements, right?
Okay.
Meaning
Yeah.
other groups are waking up really late or staying up really late to be part, but doing that on a rotation so everyone sort of feels the pain.
I
Again,
love that.
leveraging AI notes, leveraging the channels right within teams for agendas, for minutes, doing all these things. We're improving, I call it tinkering on the margins, using technology, using different tools to just make it
Mm,
easier. We're also looking at different areas like Manila and India to hire colleagues to sort of do work. Right. And if you look at those global centers of excellence we're really looking to develop, well, they might be, given their geographical location, better to support Europe on a 24/7
right.
basis, may be able to support US on a 5-hour basis, right? So what we do, and I run a weekly team meeting. And so, I'll do a late team meeting on a Friday. I'll do an earlier team meeting on a Monday and rotate those so our colleagues don't have to lose their weekend
Yeah.
to stay up late, kind of be on the US. So again, it's looking at that schedule. It's taking that, call it 20,000 foot view and looking at, all right, where's my team
Yeah. Nice.
time zone and how could I share this? And unfortunately, sometimes, right, we can't get everyone together. Okay. So the importance of notes and communication are really important after that. So that's where we're trying to flex both time and availability, but getting that communication post meeting really tight and disseminated out to the group for communication.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. Thank you for that practical example. I love the share the pain model. I always like leading with the realistic aspect of it, things, and even itself. Sometimes I call it self-deprecating. Sometimes just to share, and then you're like, okay, you're just like right up front. You're like rip off the band-aid. Like it will be painful sometimes, but we share like in a build team collaboration around that, right? That we're all pitching in. And we'll all have a turn when it works beautifully, and we'll have a turn when it's a bit painful, right? It's builds teamwork. That's such
We're
a
all on the
nice.
boat together, right? And when you can
Yeah,
do things like that together, and that's where leadership, right? Is leadership showing up, right? Like our big thing is, within a group, since we're global and can't always be in the same four walls and room together, making sure simple things, your camera's on, right?
yeah,
That's one of my biggest pet peeves, by the way, in
yes.
professional work. And that goes to a lot of young folks too. Show your face. Doesn't mean you got to say something. Just
Yes,
be visible, because it's helpful. There's nothing worse than presenting to a
I
bunch of
cannot
black boxes
agree
and
more. Yeah.
names, and so
And you're in
again,
your head, you're thinking everybody's doing their own thing, and they're not even listening, right? Like, and you do lose, like, of course, there's no replacing face to face, right? But
Mhm.
you can still, we don't have the full body, view, but there's so much that, expression that comes through attention and eye contact, and that is still all possible, right? With the camera on.
How do you read the room? Right. That's I think an important thing, and
Yeah,
particularly what we do, right, as
yeah,
a profession where we assess
yeah,
asset managers, and we do that on a high volume. So a lot of our work is a combination of being on Zoom, but going on site, reading
yes.
the room. The little hidden messages are in that communication, right? Oh, wow. Why'd they make that facial expression after I said that? If you're not on video, you don't know what's going on. So I think, again, that two-way street of, hey, am I communicating? Is it being received well? Well, you're not going to know if it's just a black screen in front.
Totally. Love it. Something I wanted to go back to something you mentioned. You made your first, you said you became manager at 23, right? So, like, so you were young. Likely, what got you to that spot is your exceptional performance as an individual contributor in a subject matter. And that's so typical for what I like to call middle management, right? Being managers or directors, kind of that middle management layer. So often we're promoted up through being excellent at delivery, but that is not what makes a successful manager at all, right? Actually, the opposite of that. So you need to now lead the team. You're responsible for team outcomes
Hmm.
and connecting that strategy to your getting your team to deliver what's needed as part of that strategy, which inevitably requires some business acumen to connect strategy to execution and people skills, right, to make sure the people are aligned and are delivering. And but and you mentioned also this is so typically not, it's needed at every level, but it's not easy to scale, introduce, build up those people leadership skills. So I just wanted to touch on that and see, have we grown since you were 23? And maybe you look at actually half of your life back. Something, I'm
Well,
45.
that's
So
really scary that you framed it
yeah,
that way,
scary
but
thought.
absolutely right.
Yeah. So, half of your lifetime ago, have we come further helping people really develop those leadership skills? Or is there still a gap in this kind of middle management kind of like approach to how to help people be good leaders in this day and age?
Yeah, yeah. No, I think going back to maybe my first promotion, and I would love for that to have been the truth, right?
Right.
That I was the best and I was undeniable, and you had to promote this person. And the real
Right.
reality of the world back then, it was attrition. Okay. And I was next person up. Right. And so that's an important thing. You never know when your opportunity is going to come knocking on the door.
There. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's really important for young people. So early in my career, what made me successful, I don't know if I'd recommend it for everybody, but, I was I'm going to stay later than everybody.
Right.
And,
Work hard. Yeah.
I think early on, I noticed folks on rotation programs, right? I didn't graduate from Harvard or Yale or, an Ivy League school, but I'd see these rotation folks of, really credentialed students come into the firm and they do 6 months here, they do 6 months there, and they get this really worldly experience, seeing a lot of different people and functions. And to your
Right.
point, understanding the business at a very young age. And then they would get to pick, right, where they wanted to go start their career. Not coming from that pedigree, I had to work a little harder. I put myself on my own rotational program. So what I did was, mastered my job and then looked for another area that was either lateral, right, or another organization that gave me that opportunity. I never made a move for money, although there were different times of my age where I needed money, whether it was kids coming down the road or whether it was to buy a house, right? But I always looked for opportunity. And then when I got there, I always figured I was at the bottom and how was I going to grind up? And so that was always doing things myself, staying late, going in on a weekend to read stuff, right? And that was, call it 20-year-old sort of me. And then 30-year-old me, getting a little bit more senior, doing things, I had a hard time letting go because that's what was
Hmm.
getting me promotions. Tony, you're the expert. Wow, Tony, you're staying up late. Tony's going to do what it takes to get it done. Great. I was exhausting myself, right, doing all of this. So
Right.
then
Right.
I
Yeah.
started realizing, right, what got you here isn't going to get you there. And that was
Yeah.
around right when I made my first vice president role, and really, really evident when I made partner a couple years ago, that you need to trust people, right? And you
Mm.
need to let go, right? And part of delegation and lifting up is being a strategic leader, priming your
Mm.
people for success and letting go and letting them do it. That was the hardest switch for me to flip in my
Yes.
career. I'll be honest with you, right? There's
Yeah.
times instinctually I even let go and gotta let it go, right? I think I've kind of tailored myself as a perfectionist earlier in my career. Definitely let that go a little bit, right? And you can't let perfection sort of get in the way of progress. And so that's a balance. Now, there's some things that I want to be a perfectionist on, right? If it's going to be the look and feel of a marketing document, right? We're going to get that tight. But, if it's a process or a way to do things, I found myself letting go. Let's try it out, right? I found there's little in business that you can't unwind or pivot or
Right.
redirect if things aren't going well. And that's sort of, you don't understand until you've been in business a little bit, right?
Yeah.
That things are never static. Things are always changing in corporate America. And to be nimble, to kind of know the stakeholders and how an organization works, how the ecosystem or industry works, the more you know about that, the easier it'll let you let go. And eventually, I think the pull of where the business needs you will take you ultimately on your destination. But get good people, set them up for success, give them small wins to show that trust and credibility that you can let go, and then give them that big project. And I think leaders get recognized. Someone
Hmm.
told me, "Hey, Tony, you're a partner now. How
Yeah.
many partners could you create?" Right. And that was a mind shift change of being less about me, but more about the organization and lifting up. And to me, I've really loved being in this role, being able to do that. And for those people willing to listen, raise their hand for opportunity, engage with me, I think I've benefited professionally from that.
No, that's so great. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's sharing that, Tony, it's such an honest reflection on, a leader's journey. And I love, especially, I want to underline a little bit again. I always pick at something that really sticks out to me. I just want to again underline because I think it's really important for the audience. Essentially, and I put it a little bit in my words, you shared how your own superpower. So what made you really successful early on, working hard when life was simpler around us, right? Just because no kids, no soccer games, like no mortgage, maybe, right? Like, things were simpler. We can lean into that superpower of staying up late, working really hard, prove self, learn. We're young, we're ambitious, go for it. But at some point, that superpower actually becomes a liability, fires that switch that's built on, experience, trust to self, trust to teammates, trust to org that I need to let go and then really kind of go differently forward to enable others for the success to come through. And so I don't burn out completely, right? That's that critical switch that everybody has to really kind of find their own timing and way to kind of to cut over to true success beyond that grind, right? And that's really worth highlighting because again, data today and lots of conversations with others show that not everybody, it's easy. That switch is not easy to make.
No, it's not, right? And I even told
Yeah.
you that I still deal with it,
Hardest,
right? I think
and you say
everyone.
hardest, I love it. Hardest thing you've done as a partner to think back on that switch. No wonder people are having a hard time. That's why I really wanted to pick at it because I think it's so
Yeah.
important.
If I were to kind of maybe like sum up the activities, right, of a
Yeah.
career, right? You go from grinding, to being recognized as an expert,
Yeah.
and it's you, right? And you want to showcase that. But where I found myself, like the best way I've been effective recently is listening, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
and particularly in my global role of listening to our European counterparts and my Australian counterparts and, everywhere else, right? There's different perspectives, right? There's not one way to do things, right? And I found that rewarding as a professional. And I think, I probably have this little bit of an intellectual curiosity bug that I
Yeah.
constantly have to itch. But learning about people, what makes them tick, what makes businesses tick. At the end of the day, I truly believe there's incentives and fears, and everyone has them, right? And when you can understand a business, what they're incentivized, what a person's incentivized, what they're worried about, right?
Yeah.
It really allows you to connect better. So I've been focusing on listening, connecting, and having a vision, right? And I
Yeah.
collaborating globally is really important, but having a view, again, going back to that point of view, that's probably been the consistent
Yeah.
theme
Yeah.
throughout the arc of my career.
Yeah.
Having a view as an entry level person and having a view as a partner, that's not going to change. Your view may change throughout your career journey, but just
Yeah. You have to have one.
yeah, if not, people are going to assume what you think. We're going to
Yeah.
assume you're okay, right?
Yeah.
And so that's
Or
really
they'll assume
important.
your path forward or what success means to you. And it's actually a very personal thing, right? Like there's the kind of corporate America climb that we just assume by default, which might not be everybody's success, right? And then not to mention the fill in your personal parts. That's really you got to understand what you're building across, not just at work, but also what does success truly mean like to you. And there's work involved with that.
There
You don't
is.
just show up. Yeah, you don't just show up and have a vision and view that's interesting to share and others want to. That's a part that has to be part of how we just are, right? How we are as humans and leaders.
And if you want to be successful in a carear, you have
Yes.
to actively manage your career, right? And you have to advocate for yourself,
Yeah.
right? And, I think I've kind of matriculated through, seeing people complain at work, and like, that unhealthy kind of toxic environment. Like, you don't want to be there. Right. And so to me, that's just someone who doesn't know how to advocate for themselves very well or communicate well up why this is a problem for him or her. Right. And so, I think you got to go through a career, see
Yeah.
people make missteps. Again, find your North Star or find the person you're going to emulate, but that person may disappoint you too, right? Or change,
Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah.
I look at it as I build your board
Yeah.
of your network, right? And that may not be one person, it may be a collection of people, right? If I look at, my business development acumen, that my North Star is someone different than my people manager North Star, right?
Yeah.
As a different journey. So what I'm trying to do is take all the best of the best that I've learned from really good managers, avoid the worst of the worst that I've seen or experienced, and come up with a not perfect style that's genuinely me. I mean, I think if you ask my colleagues and ask people that work with me, either my clients or anyone, Tony brings his genuine self to work for sure. And I think that's important. We're all people here with lives trying to advance the mission, right?
Yes,
Doing it
totally.
together and getting to know your colleagues, again, what makes them tick, incentives and fears, just allows, I just think a better day to day.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, we're all people. End of the day, we have to work together. Let's keep it real, right? I love that. And I love the other point I want to highlight when you said is very little in business can unwind, and I can't be unwinded. And that's your experience speaking right there. So I think that's also worth sharing. That there's a fear sometimes when we're going up that journey about I'm going to misstep something and what like our we are our worst enemy sometimes. We are thinking of worst case scenarios. It's the experience that really teaches you to take the step forward. We'll course correct. We can go back. We can go forward. We can go sideways. But it's taking that action versus waiting for perfection, right? That's kind of how I see that. But it's really experience that lets you do that. So it's really nice to share it.
There was a book I got early in my career, Who Moved My Cheese? Right. And it talked about jobs evolving and changing and what now. And I think that's a really important read in today's environment for both leaders and aspiring leaders, because as technology is rapidly changing industries, the way
Yeah.
we do work and all that, right? Jobs are changing, right? And
Yeah.
expectations of
Hmm.
boards and companies are changing.
Hmm. Absolutely.
I think we're always going to have to embrace change.
Yes.
Sometimes change comes at you a lot quicker, right?
Yeah.
Or you could see change kind of slowly building down the pike. And so, that's I kind of just message I want to give leaders is just be on the ready. Like I said, like I was that 23-year-old kid that became a manager one day because there was no one left to be the manager, right? And so sometimes you get that opportunity, you may fumble it or not
Yeah.
know it's an opportunity. So say yes, raise your hand, and listen, do a job. There's plenty of jobs I've done that I did not like the work, but I knew it was a necessary step to
Hmm.
sort of get to where I needed to go. And
Yeah.
so, think about your career strategically like that, whether you want to be an individual contributor, whether we want to go into leadership. I think everything we talked about still pertains, right? It's being engaged, having a view, and understanding that, hey, try something and it may work or may not work. I think that's what businesses and leaders are really looking for, idea sourcing, right, from folks, because again, there's no playbook of where we're
Yeah.
at, depending on
Yeah.
what industry you're in for sure. But
Yeah.
we're all in this together.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that perspective. I think it's very helpful. Practical. Actually, the whole conversation, Tony, has been really insightful to me. Thank you so much for such an honest and open reflection on your journey and your view as a leader today, and really how I think it's a really great example of how you're bringing your whole self and honesty to the table, so that how others can help themselves see themselves in it as well and find their own way up like you did. I wonder, taking a step back and kind of to think on all these things that we've kind of brought up during this conversation, and knowing all the things you do know now, and also accepting all the uncertainty we face with AI and all the things that are changing us. If I gave you a magic wand to say, okay, how could an organization redesign the way they build leaders so that they're prepared for the craziness of the world today and the opportunities of the world today? What would you highlight as a bottom line?
Yeah, it's a great question. Wow, that's a good zinger. Magic wand. Maybe I think I'd frame it this way.
Mhm,
We're on a journey, right?
mhm,
Transformation
mhm.
globally. Okay. And that's a fact, whether it's geopolitics
Yeah,
or corporate America, right?
yeah,
Change is a constant. And so what I would have said is I like to wave my magic wand to get to the end, right? Where AI is integrated, right?
right.
We're using this, we're not building it. But I actually think something different. I think I would say the magic wand would be to get people to appreciate and enjoy this journey, right? I think
Okay, yeah.
we're on this really amazing industrial revolution, at least within our industry of investments and assessing asset management, right? But I think that's consistent across all industry. And if
Mhm,
you look at the history of time, right? The horse and buggy became the car, the
yeah,
factories, right? The internet right now in 2007, when this thing came out, really changed sort of the game. So I just think enjoy this ride. Right. And I think we're going to look back at these times of just how crazy things really were. I think we all know they're crazy, but I don't think we're appreciating it. But the fact that we all have a part of building the future, right? And if we are not active in either engaging our career, managing our career, being active in decisions or strategy and having a voice, it's going to be determined for you,
yeah,
right? By someone else, right?
yeah.
And especially with AI, you're not going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose your job to someone who uses it better than you. Right. So I just think it's smell the roses, enjoy this ride. It's going to be scary. It's going to be stressful. But I think, careers will be built off this period.
Yeah.
New leaders will emerge from this period. And I just think to me, that's really exciting. I think it could be scary. I like to lean into the positivity and the excitement. And I think once this gets integrated and everyone's lifting their heads up a little bit more, that's where I think the world is after we kind of get through this industrial revolution part.
Well, for what it's worth, I would say that that's a very good use of the magic wand because it includes mind shift, right? Which is actually really difficult to achieve, right? So that we see today not as crazy and difficult, but we see it as full of opportunities and a bright path forward into a world that we get to shape. So I think it's a great advice, and like I said, a really great use of the magic wand.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Tony, for all the conversations, the insights, and the practical example. That's so helpful to our audience. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Sandra, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And thank you for the time.
Absolutely.